Welcome once again to Hometown Movies here on Channel 17. My name is Michael Kelly. I'm your host tonight, and we're going to be talking to a person who doesn't make films, but rather reviews films, and in that sense, he may make or break films. We're talking to Ed Bradley, who is the entertainment editor of the Flint Journal and responsible for most of the movie reviews and the feature stories, I would say, about not only film in the Flint community, but the art world in general. Ed, welcome to Hometown Movies. Let's start by kind of talking about you a little bit. How did you wind up entertainment editor of the Flint Journal?
Well, it took a long time. I really didn't have a whole lot of interest in entertainment. I grew up a sports nut. I always liked movies and theater and all that. Never thought of writing about it for a living. I was a sports writer in college and for many years afterwards. And I came to the Journal 3 years ago and fiddled around on the city desk for a while and wrote editorials for a while. And they asked me if I'd move over into the entertainment department. I thought that would be a challenge, and it's been a lot of fun.
Now, sports, a lot of people would consider sports a form of entertainment. How is entertainment in the sense of movies, theater, literature, how is that different than sports?
Well, of course, in sports, you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
That's a very telling comment.
Well, not only do you not know, but the players in the field don't know. And I think there's a certain excitement sports-wise, and I think it's natural for people to become involved in sports. But really, there's not a whole lot of difference because they're competing for the same entertainment dollar. You have most of your sports on the weekends, and you have a lot of your entertainment on the weekends because people have a lot of leisure time, and so you have to, if you're a sports PR guy or an entertainment PR guy, you got to get people in the theaters or get them to the ballpark, and that's they're both very similar. They're both very event-oriented. It's when you're an entertainment editor, it's easy to organize things because things are built around events. So they're pretty similar in those regards, and they're fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. You really laid your finger on a very profound issue very quickly, and that was the question of the difference between sports and entertainment is you don't know the outcome with sports, and so much of entertainment you do. So much of entertainment is predictable. How rare it is you go into a movie where you can't tell what's going to happen 2 or 3 scenes before it happens. What do you think about the sort of the difference between the art of entertainment, if you will, and the industry of entertainment?
Too often the art gets obscured by the industry, I suppose. Sometimes you have to struggle. You can see 10 movies a week and struggle to find the art. But when you're watching a movie and it's something like My Left Foot, or Driving Miss Daisy, or Born on the 4th of July, or something that's really profound and not predictable, and something that's well done, it's a real pleasure. You walk out of the theater, especially if you have to review something, thinking, boy, sometimes when you're reviewing something, you see movies and you look for mistakes and you can't find them. But that's all too seldom. Movie making is a business. Theater is a business, and you have to satisfy the multitudes. So you get locked into your own predictable shells of entertainment, and you sacrifice the art that way.
Have you ever seen a film that you thought was absolutely fabulous? A movie that affected you, that excited you, and just went nowhere?
Well, I'm still kidding at the Journal about my review for Great Balls of Fire that came out last summer. I mean, I didn't think it was any masterpiece, but I gave it 3.5 stars and really liked it.
That's out of how many?
Out of 4.
Oh, that's pretty good. It's a good review.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And the movie just flopped massively. Came out on video pretty fast. A lot of critics just hated it. And I guess it still kind of surprises me. But as a reviewer, it's my opinion. And you know, some of the greatest movies of all time have been panned by reviewers, and some of the lousiest movies of all time have found some people that liked them. So it's just a subjective thing. I'm just lucky enough to be able to write about it and tell people what I think. It's a real pleasure.
I used to go to movies a lot. I do less. I have children now, so I don't go to movies so much. But I can remember seeing Nashville when Bob Altman's Nashville was out, and I remember seeing it at the Flint Cinema, which is one of the last of the big screen theaters. And my wife and I were sitting there in the theater for like a Saturday 2:00 show. You know, good time. We were the only people in this entire 500 or 600 seat theater watching this wonderful movie. I just loved it, and not one other person was there in the entire theater. That's interesting. Great Balls of Fire. What was it about that one that struck you?
That was the story of Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
It was told in kind of a comical fashion. It was acted, especially the lead performance was kind of a caricature, but I thought it was a fun movie. The music was great. I just thought it was a nice, fun summer movie, and I thought it was well done. And most critics thought that most critics thought that Dennis Quaid was just awful in the lead. That the movie was too light and probably didn't delve into the dark side of this man's life, and you know, it died very, very quickly from week one. But I liked it. It was maybe a quirk in the way I looked at the movie, but I don't regret it. I mean,
do you remember the film American Hot Wax?
Yeah.
Now there was a film that dealt with sort of the rock and roll mythology in a very lighthearted way, but now to me I had a lot of fun with that. That was fun to go to, and well, I doubt if Jerry Lee Lewis put on many concerts for free. There's a certain mythological thing, but that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a myth. It's not like you're dealing with hard historical reality. This is a fairy tale almost. Yeah.
That's the way I looked at Great Balls of Fire, but not too many other critics did, apparently.
Yeah. What about the Oscars? Now, that's not been very long ago. What do you think of the voting on that?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised that Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor for My Left Foot. I saw My Left Foot just a couple days before the Oscars. I had to go outside of Flint to see it, but I just thought his performance was spellbinding. And I saw Driving Miss Daisy. I thought, well, Morgan Freeman, best acting performance of the year. And I saw Born on the 4th of July. I thought, well, Tom Cruise has got a lock on the Oscar. But My Left Foot is the kind of movie. It's about a handicapped man who can move only but his left foot, who grows up in very poor surroundings in working class Dublin in the 1930s, and he becomes a successful painter. He paints with his foot, becomes an author, and this was a story of his life, and it really had the potential to be a real sentimental, mawkish kind of movie, but the acting was just terrific. And it's, as I say, it's the kind of movie you review and you're maybe trying to nitpick to see what was wrong, and there really wasn't much wrong with it. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. I thought most of the other picks were pretty much what I thought. I thought Jessica Tandy, Denzel Washington were terrific, and nothing really surprised me other than the fact that the director of Driving Miss Daisy, Bruce Beresford, wasn't even nominated. And to see that win Best Picture, it's a real rarity with the Academy.
Speaking of people not nominated, let's deal with Michael Moore a little bit. You were one of the first people, I think, in town to actually see the movie and write about it. And we're talking about Roger and Me. And Michael was not nominated. Dealing just with that aspect, that was a fairly controversial decision. And I tend to be from the school, sort of the Fred Zimmerman school of documentary. I like straight, accurate sort of documentary. But then I really liked Roger and Me. I thought it was a fun movie. What do you think about the lack of a nomination for Michael's film?
I was surprised, given what I knew about the documentary committee in terms of its general conservative air in the past. The best documentary of 1988 Thin Blue Line wasn't nominated either, and I thought it was certainly possible that Michael's movie wasn't going to be nominated. There was some criticism of the film the last couple months prior to the nominations that I think affected its chances. I think had the nominations come out earlier, November, December, that it probably would have not only been nominated for Best Documentary, but maybe even Best Picture. There was some talk along those lines. I thought Roger and Me was one of the 10 best movies I saw last year. I really liked it. I really loved the central idea behind it, and that's that GM cares more about profits than people. And I think in that regard, he was really dead on with that criticism. I was troubled by some of the methods he used in terms of moving around the chronology. When I reviewed it, though, I felt that was subordinate to his message. Some critics didn't. Some people were really troubled by that. Some people who are traditionalists who like a real straightforward documentary, just the facts, I could see where they would be troubled by that.
To me, just viewing it, the most powerful moments of Michael's film were not the ones that he crafted. For example, the final scene where he cuts Roger Smith's Christmas message with a eviction. That was not that powerful. There was some footage in there that was very powerful. I can remember specifically one of the eviction scenes, and there was a family being thrown out, and there was a young child, a boy about 3 years old. And I remember him sitting out on the corner while the furniture and things were being moved out of the house, and he was just there very tight. And his mother called him from the house, and he just said, "What?" And the sound of his voice, the look on his face, the sense of, here's this 3-year-old child who has already been failed. He's only 3 years old, and already things are falling apart for him. That was so powerful, and that is what a documentary can do. I mean, mind you have to shoot 10 hours to get 30 seconds, but that was so, for me, that was, there were two things that were powerful in the film. One was that scene, and the other was the interesting juxtaposition between the rabbit being killed, when the whole audience went, "Ooh, yuck, oh, how terrible," and then a person is shot 10 minutes later, the audience doesn't even blink, because we see a lot more people killed than rabbits, I guess. But that, to me, that's the power of the documentary. Where some of the other things are sort of more are showbiz, I guess. I mean, like that last scene, that's showbiz, that sort of thing. But the power of a documentary is the simplicity so often. Just this moment of reality that comes right out of the blue. All of a sudden, it strikes you because it is such a human moment.
I thought another very powerful part of that was when the truck plant closed down one of its lines, and they show the last truck going on, and people are clapping. And then one guy breaks the mood and says, "What are you clapping for? We just lost our jobs." And I remember the first time I saw that, I was just, it was a very moving sort of thing. And I think things like that. Another thing I really liked about the movie was the way it was edited. Putting music in at certain times, juxtapositioning the life of the rich versus the life of the poor, was really well done. A lot of fast editing, really good cutting. The two editors who did that movie were first-time film editors, and I thought the way they did it was really remarkable.
Yeah, it was Wendy Stanzler.
Wendy Stanzler, who was from Flint, and Jennifer Beeman, and they did a really super job.
Do you think that Michael Moore is going to have a long future in the movies, or do you think that this may be sort of the high point that he hit and fell back from?
I don't know. There's no question that he's very talented and has a really good wit and a good mind. I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens from here on out. He knows Flint as well as any place because he's lived here his whole life. And I think it'll be interesting to see when he gets into things that he's not as familiar with. He may do really well, he may not. I don't know. Just to have a $200,000 documentary that makes $7 million is kind of a high point as it is. But it'll be really interesting to see. I can't really foretell his future. Really, I don't know. But I think he's very talented, and he certainly has the wherewithal to go places.
You said something I want to follow up on. When you talked about the selection process for the documentary nomination, you referred to it as the selection committee as being conservative. I don't know if you meant that politically or kind of culturally. In other words,
I really didn't mean politically. I meant in terms of being purists, in terms of what you said about liking rather straight documentaries. I think a lot of people feel, documentary-wise, that when you sit and watch a documentary, that the documentary filmmaker owes the audience a certain amount of trust, that what is going to be on the screen is completely true. You can be Oliver Stone and do the story of Ron Kovic and mess a little bit with Kovic's life in terms of what happened. And it's okay because you're working with actors and you're fictionalizing the story, and I think people know that because there have been a lot of biographical films that have been, that have tinkered with the lives of their subjects. But when you do a documentary, and I think you're working with a different standard. And I think, for example, if Michael would have, there are two things he could have done. He could have made a really straight documentary, which he didn't want to do, which really wouldn't have been very entertaining. And I can understand why he wouldn't want to do that. And it's real easy for me to talk in hindsight, of course, so you can take what I say with a grain of salt. But, if he'd have had some kind of disclaimer at the beginning, maybe even just some kind of witty thing like, this is my story, it may not be exactly...
if he had just said something like a personal viewpoint or something.
I think so. And I don't think that would have detracted from the entertainment value of the movie. And I think, as I say, it's real easy to talk in hindsight, but I think a lot of the concerns people had could have been short-circuited by doing something like that. Because people could say, well, look, it's his viewpoint, and he can say what he wants.
It's interesting because he didn't come out and put the label documentary on it. He just made a movie, and people outside of the process of making the film said, "Oh, this is a documentary," and he was judged by those criteria. When in fact, one could say he was making "What's Up, Tiger Lily," only a different style.
Yeah, he's called it a mockumentary, and he was calling it that even before it was shown at all these film festivals to all this acclaim. But there was no indication, really, that the movie was anything but a documentary. I mean, it was kind of implied because Michael's a real person, Roger Smith's a real person, there are real people in the movie, no one was acting from a script. And I think critics looked at it, especially critics who weren't familiar with Flynn or maybe with the GM situation, and thought, well, it's a documentary. And in many ways it was, but it certainly was not a traditional documentary. So, I guess in that regard, I'm not that surprised it wasn't nominated as Best Documentary, because it wasn't exactly a documentary, even though that's probably the closest thing to what it was.
I thought the timing was very interesting. You alluded to it before when you said if the nominations had been earlier, he probably would have gotten the nomination, but because it was when it was. And I thought of it, I guess one gets a little suspicious after a while, after a few years of watching the process politically. What struck me was the timing of the counterattack on Roger and me. It's very much of an orchestrated counterattack. It's perfectly legitimate. The promotion was an orchestrated promotion, too. But what struck me was that the counterattack on that film was launched literally almost to the day to influence the Oscar process. In other words, as the committee was sitting down, the New York Times was writing its article that the counterattack against Roger and me, which was legitimate. I don't think the counterattack was phony, but the timing of it was very interesting. Just at the right time to sort of get maximum impact to discourage a nomination and discourage the selection by the Academy.
Well, I don't think the criticism, and I guess I can speak for the Journal. It's not designed to promote or not promote it for a nomination. There was criticism of the film as early as last fall, but it is true that GM attempted to force certain programs that Michael was on to that they'd pull their ads. That's the truth, and there's no question about that. I'm not sure that the New York Times or the Los Angeles Times really orchestrated anything. I think the natural time to do a story on an Oscar contender is when it's a contender, and I think that's kind of a natural thing.
But like, for example, what the Journal did. The Journal, dealt with it right from the start, and the Journal was dealing with it as a hometown story, and dealt with, the sort of the pros and cons of the issue months and months before the Oscar was even a contender. When was it Pauline Kael that sort of had the major?
Well, there was an article in Film Comment magazine that came out in November, I think. Obviously, the Journal's not read as widely as Film Comment or Pauline Kael, who writes for the New Yorker. And yeah, I think a lot of other media looked at the film after those, after the Kael review and after the Film Comment story. So I guess that's when a lot of the criticism of the movie began.
It was funny to see. I can remember catching the sentence. You've seen it so many times when you sort of somebody's on the rise and then they get to the top and then the media turns. And says, okay, now we can't build them up anymore. Let's tear them down. And you've seen it with Michael Jackson and Madonna, for heaven's sake. You see it with Michael Moore, and you watch a thing like Michael's film because Michael's a friend. You know him, and you follow his career with a certain extra interest because this is a guy you ate hot dogs with at Angelo's, and it was very funny, and it was before the Flint premiere, and I remember reading a specific article. And it was, I think, Associated Press. It was printed in the Free Press. And I read the article and said, oh, the wind has changed, It was funny because there is a certain dynamic. And I don't mean, I'm not a media basher in the sense of all the media is this and that and the other thing. But there's a dynamic at work. It's got to do with what's the story, what's news. And after you've written 10 stories about how great Michael Moore is, that's not news anymore. And the news becomes how rotten Michael Moore is. And it happens to almost every celebrity. You must have seen that process where somebody it's a wonderful discovery and everyone is delighted to be the one to discover this new star or director or writer. And then when he's been discovered by everybody, then you become the one to attack him.
Well, I don't think the media... it's natural to question things in the media. That's why we're here. That's why we're watchdogs and whatnot. And if something, if a celebrity gets to a certain point, or there's a controversial movie or a program or something like that, I think people are going to look into it. I think it's a natural thing. And I think that's part of what came about with Michael was it was, you could almost foresee it. But as far as it being orchestrated, like newspaper editors sat around thinking, well, we're going to mount this campaign, I don't think that was, I don't think you could say that at all.
I don't believe that. When you talk about the media, sort of pack journalism and that sort of thing, I don't think it's orchestrated. People go to the same bar, they hang around the same places, they read the same magazines, they draw the same conclusions. I think it's much more organic than a process where 5 guys got together and said, okay, let's take this sucker down, But I think there is a certain institutional dynamic, if you will, that sort of builds them up, and once they're up, takes them down, just for the news value of it. Have you seen it? Haven't you seen that before? Oh
yeah, you've seen a lot of things. You can see it in almost everything. Any major story. Watergate began with 1 newspaper and 2 reporters, and it spread all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a natural thing. But what is natural news gathering, and what is vendetta or anything like that? Well, I think there's a pretty wide gulf between the two. I don't think people, when dealing with Roger and me, had access to grind. Maybe GM did, but GM kept pretty quiet through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, I see what you mean about the media, but I don't completely agree with you in terms of the media's motives.
Well, I'm not even talking motives. Motives is a separate issue. I'm talking sort of an institutional inertia. The story, you want to talk about someone. For example, you want to talk about Janet Jackson. Because why? People want to read about Janet Jackson, right? And after you've written 10 stories about how great Janet Jackson is, there's no new story about how great she is, so you start to write about how lousy she is. And that just sort of, you have to write another story because the audience wants to read another story. It's kind of like, the tabloid newspapers that will write, lousy news about sort of any star, but the idea is to get the picture on the front cover because people are going to, if they see whoever the popular star is right now, Kim Basinger, say, and if you even get Kim Basinger having an affair with Prince, that's great because people want to read about Kim and they want to read about Prince. So you can sell newspapers.
Yeah, that's been the way entertainment reporting has been for years and years and years. I mean, they're becoming personalities. And if something happens in their lives that's controversial, and the media finds out about it, well, yeah, I mean, that is going to come out.
Yeah. Is it a pleasure for you to be able to go into a movie, and if you like it, to take that story out and tell 30 or 40,000 people, this is a great movie, you ought to go see it?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I enjoy that more than tearing down a movie. I think some reviewers are different that way. I tend to give them a movie the benefit of the doubt. Again, My Left Foot, something like that. I saw Field of Dreams last year, which is another movie that I enjoyed immensely. And yeah, it was really nice to be able to write a review about that movie because there are a lot of people in Flint who either had never heard of it or didn't know much about it, be able to tell them what's good about it, what's bad about it, and influence their, what they're going to do on a Friday or Saturday night. And that's kind of a big responsibility, actually. I mean, I think you owe it to your readers to be truthful and honest about what you see, what you see on a stage or in a movie theater, because people are spending $5.50 or whatever to go see what you're recommending. So I think you have to look at it through the reader's eyes.
And it's even more than that, really. When you talk about the two people buying a ticket and dinner and the babysitter, and pretty soon you're up to $40 a night.
It's very expensive. It really is, and plus there's so much more competition, as we were talking about before, for the entertainment dollars. So you have to give people options. But if there's something that you really think that you want to recommend to them, then by all means go ahead and do it. And if there's something that's not very good, you should not be ashamed to knock it.
What about the local stuff that's done? We've got a lot of things like the Buckham Alley Theater and the Flint Community Players and all that sort of stuff. What do you think about the quality of local, the art scene here in town?
I can speak to the theaters. First of all, I think it's better than I thought it would be when I took the job. Because when I was going to a play, you go to a play before and you're just there to enjoy it, and when you're going to a play to review it, you tend to look at it a little more critically, and I've liked a lot of what's going on. I think sometimes we need to be a little more, or the theaters need to be a little more adventurous in what they put on. But really, that's really my only minor criticism generally. I do think that the art scene here is not supported as well as in some other places, and I think that's too bad in a way. But you could say the same thing about the movies in terms of what comes here, what doesn't come here. One theater owner told me he was really leery about booking a Woody Allen movie because he only knew it would play a week here, and I think that's too bad. And you want to knock the theater owner? Well, he should be more adventurous, or the new Vicar Buckham. Well, they should put it on something more adventurous. But then again, they're non-profit, but they have to draw people in, please their audience. So it's kind of a tough situation to be in.
Well, we've been talking with Ed Bradley, who is the entertainment editor of the Flint Journal, about the local art scene, about some issues about film and all that. And I've enjoyed. We could go on for another half hour. Maybe you'll come back again, I hope.
Okay.
This is Michael Kelly for Hometown Movies. On behalf of John Kotarski and all of our crew, I hope you'll join us in 2 weeks when we'll be back again. Thank you.